We start with a breakthrough that it's hoped will end 2 years of civil war in Ethiopia. Both sides engaged in the northern Tigray region have agreed to stop the fighting. Representatives of the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front signed the deal for a, quote, permanent cessation of hostilities at peace talks in South Africa. Since fighting broke out in November 2020, thousands have been killed, millions displaced, and many more driven to the brink of starvation. Here's the African Union's special broker for the talks, Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo.
The two parties in the Ethiopian conflict have formally agreed to the cessation of hostilities, as well as to systematic, orderly, smooth, and coordinated disarmament.
Samuel Getachew is a journalist in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Samuel, good to see you again. How are people reacting to the news of this breakthrough?
Well, it came right now. It's about 10 p.m. in Ethiopia. This came as a surprise for many Ethiopians. But in a general terms, Ethiopians want to see an end to this conflict. This conflict has affected millions of Ethiopians. Up to 600, even more than 600,000 Ethiopians have died. And there is a uniform understanding among Ethiopians on all sides that if this conflict doesn't end very soon, even the breakup of this country would become its reality. And people seem to be excited so far.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed expressed his gratitude as the peace talks concluded. But just a day earlier, he said his government was eyeing victory in the war. So is this being seen as a win for him?
Well, I think if you look at the idea of peace, which the country really desperately needs, it's Ethiopia that wins at the very end. The Prime Minister has been making accusations against TPLF. TPLF has been making accusations even a few days ago. So this shows you that there was a heated debate among the two actors in trying to solve this issue, which was really a breaking point in terms of where this country was headed. So, I mean, the Prime Minister has acknowledged the fact that it's friends of Ethiopia that really supported this agreement to be a reality. And he said he counts among them to support Ethiopia in terms of the developmental aid that Ethiopia desperately needs, especially in areas that have been affected by this conflict.
The African Union says this is not the end of the peace process and that implementation of the deal really is key. What are the potential pitfalls on the way there?
Well, in terms of the peaceful coexistence that this country needs, it's all up in the air. There seems to be an agreement between TPLF and the Ethiopian government, but there has been 600,000 people have died in this conflict. There is fear that this conflict would go on even when the country and when TPLF are sitting on a table and shaking hands. There is fear that the people that have been affected by this conflict, it's not just in Tigray, Amhara, and Afar, will proceed and try to defeat the other side 100%. And that is really what the fear is at the moment.
What does this deal mean for the millions of people who've been displaced by the conflict?
Well, the UN has been saying they have been trying to help. They have been asking for a humanitarian corridor that wasn't available in Tigray. The Ethiopian government was blaming TPLF. TPLF was blaming the Ethiopian side. We are not able to verify most of the information because Tigray has been off limits for many of us while this kind of accusation goes back and forth. But the UN has been saying that unless there is help that's heading to Tigray, there will be famine that defined this country for generations, coming back and becoming a reality of Ethiopia once again.
So this is just the beginning. The road ahead is very long. Samuel Getachew in Addis Ababa, thank you so much for that update.
Let's get more from our correspondent, Adrian Krish in Cape Town. Welcome, Adrian. How big a breakthrough is this?
Well, It is a big breakthrough, Phil. Initially, the mediators were hoping that both sides would just, agree on some sort of ending the hostilities for some time so that they could finally keep on negotiating. But then now we do have a peace agreement, at least an initial one, although we don't have many details. Remember also that there were no information coming out of these talks for many days. There were schedules to finish on Sunday already. There was no news. Both sides agreed on a media blackout. So many are surprised to really see a peace agreement now that is signed.
OK, so that presumably then we don't know much about the concessions each side has made.
Right, no, we don't know much, but I mean, what we know is that both sides were under tremendous pressure to act. The Ethiopian government basically made a lot of advances during the peace talks. They took over territory while the talks were happening, so that was, on their perspective, definitely a win. But on the other hand, they also had massive financial losses during the course of the war. Basically, they're running out of money, so they needed to find a solution because the economy that has been growing so much in Ethiopia before this war has been going downhill. On the other hand, the Tigray side has had massive human losses during these battles. A lot of their fighters died. A lot of the people, of course, who were living there suffered. Some estimates said that up to 600,000 people died as a result of this conflict in the past 2 years. Millions were displaced. So both sides certainly had to act, had to find a solution. But once again, we can't really talk which secessions they made at this stage because it is not clear. There are very sketchy details so far, and likely they will be there's a need for renegotiating the details, or they will be announced on a later stage.
Yeah, just on that, we have the African Union envoy describing this as a new dawn for Ethiopia. Is this expected to bring a lasting peace between these two sides?
Well, hopefully. Both sides, during the presentation, during the press briefing, already talked about rebuilding the communities and rebuilding destroyed infrastructure. That's a good sign. But what Olusegun Obasanjo, the representative of the African Union and the former Nigerian president, also said that this is only the beginning of the peace process. This is not the end of it, and we know from history, we have seen it in the past, signing of a peace deal does not necessarily mean long-lasting peace. Some critics are already afraid that this might not be the case. Remember Eritrea, another party of the war, the neighboring country that was basically fighting against the Tigrayans alongside the Ethiopian government, was not a part of these peace negotiations. They were not on the table, and people are now wondering what will their reaction be. Will they agree to what was signed to the peace agreement or not? How will things unfold? So there's still a lot of uncertain points. Some people are skeptical that we will see long-lasting peace, but on the other hand, this is a moment of optimism for the people of Tigray who have been going through unimaginable suffering in the past 2 years.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Adrian Krish in Cape Town.